You know, I have a saying. The first movie you review in the new year sets up what kind of year you're going to have for movies as well as yourself. And with this being the first horror film in the new decade of the 2000s, as well as horror films for that decade, let's hope this isn't an omen of what's to come. Hoping for some good ones to find. Because you'd think with a new decade, companies would learn from the mistakes that they made in the 80s and 90s and strive to be better. Less studio interference that plagued movies like Nightbreed and Hellraiser 4 and the Halloween Curse of Michael Myers. And fighting against the MPAA who butchered films like Dr. Giggles, My Bloody Valentine, and all those great slashers of the 80s. Well, today's film shows that is clearly not the case. And it goes to show why studios look at January as the dump months of movies. And this clearly should have had more dumped on it than just the snow and January stench. There's hidden treasures in that dump, don't get me wrong. Demon Knight came out in January, and that's a great film. This ain't one of them. That film is none other than Supernova. I don't even know why I'm doing this, because I should be doing this in disgust like this. Why? Well, get on the ship, take a seat, and let's fly through a rift in space and time as we talk Supernova. Now, Supernova, this was a film made in the year 2000, and this is directed by 3 people. I shit you not. And there's a couple good minds in here. That's what is so crazy about this film. The first one being Walter Hill, who's a great mind in the film industry, being that he helped bring the Alien to life with Alien, and he would help on the sequels, and I know he wrote Alien 3 or did some rewrites while the film was being shot, but he also directed some great action films like 48 Hours, Another 48 Hours, Wild Bill. He even directed Last Man Standing. That being said, he's not the only one who directed this film, and he goes under a different name because he wanted to remain uncredited. Why? We're going to get into that later, but you also had directing duties done by Jack Sholder, who is kind of a big name in the horror industry. I know some people don't like some of his films, but some of those films have gained cult followings, being that he directed A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge, yes, as a lot of people point out, the gay one, The Hidden, Alone in the Dark. He also directed Wishmaster 2, which I do think it's his weakest film, and definitely a downgrade from the first Wishmaster. It's much better than this, though. And you had Francis Ford Coppola. Yes, the Francis Ford Coppola directing this. The Godfather, Apocalypse Now, that guy. 3 people directed this film. And the question you may be asking yourself is why? Well, we need to talk about the behind the scenes and how much of a mess it was. Because the idea for this film actually goes all the way back to 1990. And director William Malone, as well as a writer who had done Creature, and he would go on to direct the House on Haunted Hill remake, which I've also reviewed. He pitched the idea of a script he wrote called Dead Star, which he envisioned as Dead Common Space. It was going to be a budget of $5 to $6 million, and it was going to be about a group of people who find an alien artifact that they bring back to Earth and it unleashes hell on the group. H.R. Giger was going to handle the effects. That sounds cool. And MGM got a hold of it with the intention of making it, but it sat on the shelf for a while, and right as they were starting to get it ready, Event Horizon comes out. And despite it bombing on video, it has started to gain a cult following. And around that time, Paramount had such high expectations for that film that MGM panicked as they were going to be in fear of being compared to that film, so they brought in 4 writers to rewrite the script into what it is now. William has since not seen the new rewrites, he hasn't been in contact with the group, and he never heard what his script was being turned into. Once MGM approved the script, they gave the film a budget of $60 to $90 million, with the original intention of having Jeffrey Wright direct, and Vincent D'Onofrio was going to have a lead role, but he found himself butting heads over creative differences with MGM, and he, along with Vincent D'Onofrio, walked off. And basically, they had to go find some new directors. They then decided on Jack Sholder to direct, but MGM head Frank Mancuso Sr. was reluctant to hire him due to his experience in the past. And then James Spader gets cast, and he pushes for Walter Hill to take the directing chair, which he did. And right from the start, things took a rough turn, as once he accepted the job, Walter was given only 2 months of prep time before shooting began, and also requested that he himself do some script rewrites. He had to write it fast, though, as MGM was in fear of a SAG strike that was supposed to take place, which got averted as they were writing the script. And once shooting continued, MGM began to stick their grubby paws into the film, as Walter wanted to shoot for an R-rated blood and gore horror film that would be like Hellraiser in space, but its own thing, as opposed to Event Horizon. And shooting went very smooth. However, as shooting continued, MGM and Walter Hill could not find middle ground as they continued to butt heads, as they suddenly started to have second thoughts about the R-rated script that Walter had in mind for the film. And we're starting to think that maybe we should start to make this film appeal to everyone and opt for a more PG-13-esque horror film that would give the film a wider demographic and make it more hip with today's audience. Walter put his foot down and was like, no, and tried to continue to make the film. And this may explain why right in the middle of production, the budget got cut in half in retaliation to his decision. And it had a huge effect on the film, as there were still aspects of the script that needed to be shot. But not helping matters was while Patrick Tatopoulos, who designed Godzilla in the 1998 movie, which is not a bad design, it's not a bad film, and the upcoming Pitch Black was handling the practical effects, Digital Domain, who in 1999 had a hand in Lake Placid, was to handle the CGI. And due to an impending partnership that they had in the deal with MGM, they were supposed to get a discount on handling the CGI. However, due to the deal not coming through to fruition that fast, they had to pay full price for them to work on the film. This meant a lot of ideas for scenes involving effects had to be trimmed or removed. Once shooting wrapped, Walter began to try and edit the film into a good state, and the people were still working on the effects, but MGM was quickly pushing for the film to be screened to test audiences, as they were hopeful, much like Paramount, that this film would be a huge hit. The only problem was the effects were never finished, and despite Walter trying to fight against them screening the film, they went ahead and did it anyway. And as Walter predicted, the first test screening went awful. This, of course, called for additional reshoots, but Walter, frustrated with how the team at MGM was treating him and how they butchered his film, walked off the production and chose to remain uncredited. Still needing a director, they brought in Jack Sholder to do some additional reshoots, which was better received by test screeners, but he also felt the burden of studio interference. He walked off too. There was also some stuff that still needed to be shot, so they called in Francis Ford Coppola, because if there's anybody who can help, it's the guy who gave us Apocalypse Now and the man who defended Victor Salva. To finish editing the film, he did his American Zoetrope studio. And this meant, because he knew about the PG-13 rating, he had to cut out several moments of Patrick Tatopoulos' blood and guts effects and various moments of his effects work on the film. This is why in some moments of the film, the death scenes, which I'll get into, that look very ho-hum and are edited like they were edited on a chopping board. This got an even worse reaction, and he left the film too and sent an apology to the cast for what they endured. Because of the sinking ship, MGM decided to sell the film off and decided against screening the film, as they knew what the reaction would be. And the castle started to crumble and show its cracks, starting with box office. Because this film opened on January 14th, Martin Luther King weekend, the same day as next Friday. And keep in mind, I want people to keep in mind, this film's production had dailies talking about how bad the production was. So people knew what was going down, and they spoke with their wallets. Because it opened to number 8 at the box office and grossed over only $5 million. By next weekend, it fell even lower to the 12th spot and made only over $10 million. So it's flopping. and I guarantee you the movie isn't going to get its money back. And the critics spoke too. On Rotten Tomatoes, it has an 11%. Critics ripped the film apart for the final product while acknowledging that this is what happens when a film is made by a committee and not people wanting to tell a good story. That didn't excuse the film for not being scary, the film's cardboard characters, and the screenplay. And the audience side is no better, as it has an 18%. And on IMDb, it has a 4.8 out of 10. So close to a 5. I don't know where that 4 comes from, because a lot of people I've talked to have never heard of this film, didn't know it was coming out, as they aren't as knowledgeable on movies as I am or check the sites. So I don't know if there is actually a group of people who genuinely enjoy this film. If you do, that's fine. I'm not gonna, no burden on you, no skin off my nose. Or they feel it's so bad it's good. I'm leaning towards the latter. I don't know how anybody can even put this film in the realm of a 4, because 4 must mean there's some merits to it. The only merit I can think of that this film gave me is that I'm sitting here ranting on this trash and telling people to not see it. You know, last year around this time, I reviewed Virus. I thought Virus was bad. This convinced me that at least Virus had some merit to it. I stand by that review, but at least Virus was R-rated. At least it had some good effects. At least it was made by people who tried to make a fun monster movie. I think they would have done better if they didn't have a guy like John Bruno directing, but I would honestly rather watch Virus than this. Yes, I fucking said it, as opposed to this. This was boring, horribly edited, and just confused on its tone. It can't decide what it wants to be. It's suddenly one thing, then it's another. It wants to be horror, then it wants to be a sci-fi action film. Even the trailer and the TV spot showed how confused this film was, because it was advertised like a silly action film. That's how just confused people were making this film. And to think that this is the horror film that kicks off the 2000s. I don't know what MGM was thinking about releasing this. It should have stayed on the shelves, or at least started from scratch and made the film what Walter Hill wanted it to be, or even what William Malone wanted to be, especially being that he had success with the House on Haunted Hill remake. Because I doubt a functioning human being looked at this and said the audience will love this. They must have skipped showing it to the person who runs MGM. Because this is the same studio that released Silence of the Lambs and RoboCop. Some of the greatest, most influential films of all time for people. And this is the same studio that releases this film. And how you start the 2000s decade. Give me a break. But anyway, getting into the cast in this film. With the cast, you got James Spader from Endless Love. He was also in Stargate. He's going to be in a film called The Watcher with Keanu Reeves, which I plan to check out. Peter Facinelli, who's done a bunch of TV stuff. The biggest thing he did was an episode of Law & Order, which I don't really watch Law & Order, so I can't say. Robert Forster, who I like a lot as an actor, from Alligator. He was also in Uncle Sam. He's the mayor who got blown up. He was also in Jackie Brown. You have Angela Bassett from What's Love Got to Do. She was in Boys in the Hood and Vampire in Brooklyn. You have Diamond Phillips from Bats. He was also in The First Power. Wilson Cruz from TV's My So-Called Life. This is another role from Robin Tunney, who was in The Craft and End of Days, which I previously reviewed. But getting into the plot is basically we see this crew with Nick, played by James Spader, their captain AJ, played by Robert Forster, the nurse Kaylee, played by Angela Bassett, Danica, played by Robin Tunney, and her soon-to-be husband, played by Diamond Phillips, who are aboard this ship called the Nightingale, which is basically a medical ship that they are heading home on, using a device that allows them to travel through the space-time continuum and jump through a rift that brings them to their destination. During the trip, they get a transmission on a mining moon about a group of people have found this alien artifact, and they're trying to transport home, and they decide to investigate, which costs them the life of their captain, leading to Nick and Kaylee to take in the reins as captain. and they find the artifact and bring it on along with a survivor named Carl, played by Peter Facinelli. I cannot say his name right. I'm very sorry about this, guys. But he reawakens, and pretty much we learn that basically he wants the artifact, whereas the other guys want to destroy it. And this artifact gives him unique abilities, because we see Diamond Phillips actually gets enticed by it and puts his hand into it, and he gets increased muscles and agility. And pretty much that's where the film kicks off, is that they want to destroy the artifact, but Carl does not. And pretty much he starts killing people on the ship. So now the group needs to survive before Carl gets a hold of the object. Will the group be able to survive and get off the ship with no problems and destroy the artifact? Or will Carl get what he wants and use his new abilities to have them all killed? You know, I could have put more effort into that, but this film doesn't deserve it. And watching this film, this is a film that is just so frustrating to watch, because there's potential for a great horror sci-fi movie. And there's an interesting idea for an action horror in the vein of Event Horizon meets Hellraiser, which the alien artifact, you can kind of say, is this film's equivalent to the Lamont configuration. And sort of like Hellraiser, they become addicted to it, and they're trying to destroy it, and you have someone on the ship killing people to get to it. And on paper, that sounds very cool, but the sad thing is, this movie is a mess in the story department, and it starts with the film's pacing. There is no middle ground with it. It either moves too fast or it is too slow. And when it moves fast, it does such a horrible job developing its characters, and you have no reason to care about anybody in this film. And none of them have any sort of personality. Every single one that talks, there's no connection that the viewer has to these characters. So when it starts, you could give any less of a fuck if they live or die. And when it's slow, it's boring. It's really boring. Nothing much happens in this film. It does nothing to set the stage for the horror, and it does nothing to set up any fun action scenes. And the plot points that are touched upon don't really push the film forward, or they come in at 1 second too late into the film and they're never touched upon again, and it doesn't, so you don't feel like there's used in any sort of a way to give a character an arc. Like Diamond Phillips and Robin Tunney's characters, there's hints dropped that she's pregnant. That goes nowhere. It's not done to really further the characters. There's no plot point that'll come back with. And it's never talked about again. So you can kiss that plot point goodbye. And there's a part of the story where it's revealed Angela Bassett and Carl had some relationship going on, and he was abusive to her. That's never touched upon again. It's only there to say how evil the guy is. And that just feels like it makes his character artificially evil than actually evil. So even the villain's underdeveloped. And it fails to get across what kind of threat he actually is. And there isn't even a story to tell what kind of creature he is. There's no hints dropped. There's no moment of like, oh, he's an alien. That's never touched upon. And why is he even doing this? Okay, he wants the artifact for the power. Why does he want the power? There's no story to that. I don't know if they had that filmed and they cut it, or that was like a graphic element that they had to cut because they wanted to give it the PG-13 rating, but it really hurts his presence as a villain. There's even moments where characters are romantically linked, like James Spader and Angela Bassett, who only have like 2 scenes together, and then fucking in a room on zero gravity. I shit you not. So there's no sense of pacing where you can stop the film to get an interesting story on these characters. And the moments that are there are just boring. And you have characters standing in rooms talking to one another. And it's not interesting. It doesn't further the story. And it's just sort of like just there to pad out the film. So storytelling is atrocious. And it makes me wonder what they had in mind for the finished film before MGM got involved. But yeah, the story is awful and needed a lot more time left alone. Now, on a technical side, I can't blame the three directors because it's obvious they were fed up making the film because of the constant breathing down the neck that they got from MGM. And it clearly shows because the directing I find to be very mixed. There's some good to directing, but it is flawed. It's lacking the dynamic horror angle that you would expect from a film like this, which Event Horizon got across so perfectly. Even like Alien or Aliens, even Alien 3 did this much better. It's lacking what those directors brought to the table, especially when you have three different directors whose directing styles vary, so you don't feel like it's in the same world, because it really looks inconsistent. There's a lot of scenes where the lighting is too bright and they're lacking any real mood to the areas. There's some shots that look like they belong in a completely different film, like Apollo 13, not something like this. There isn't even any real energy to the action portion. Some camera angles look the same. The closest you get to any real energy in the movie is when James Spader gets to the planet and the construction vehicles come to life and start attacking him, and the movement of the camera in that part. I thought that was pretty cool. I'll give that credit. I thought there was some cool shots there, and I especially liked the shots in those facilities and the lighting in that part. And I'll admit there's some cool shots of the ships, and with some great model work and the camera there showing the exterior of the ship. But even that's ruined by studio demands because there's a lot of violent moments that are trimmed out. Look no further than Lou Diamond Phillips' death. I don't know if it's he crushed his head or he put his thumbs in his eyes, but that death is horribly edited. And so you're just like, that's it? And even when it comes to moments involving action, I know I praised that one scene, but that doesn't account for the whole film because they're very ho-hum, very boring, placed in the wrong areas in some place. So there's no sense of just uniqueness to some of the shots, and they're placed in places where there's not much happening in those shots. And they just look uninspired. And just shots we've seen before, but done better. Even Event Horizon had more interesting shots done. The directing in that is much better than anything in this. I still remember the shot where they step into the ship and it's like this meat grinder looking thing that goes around like this that looks like that level in Turok 2. That film did it much better. It knew how to set up its atmosphere and it was directed better. And I'll even say, for as good as the sets are in this film, the sets in that movie are much better. There's some good, I will say, though. The sets in this film I do like, and they are well designed. I like the look of the ship with that sort of virtual reality look to it, with small portions of glass, particular areas of the ship. That I appreciate, and I thought it looked cool. Even the moment with the construction stuff coming alive, I appreciate that they used real construction vehicles and didn't CGI them. But good sets don't save a movie, and this is a prime example of that. And so much more could have been done with the action of the horror. $60 to $90 million. And this is the best they can come up with. With like a few bright spots there, there's not enough to it. And like I said, Event Horizon did a lot of this better. It also doesn't help that these three directors don't get the best out of their cast. I will say this, though. James Spader is trying with what he is given, especially with what was edited out. I do feel that could have benefited his character, but he does what he can. I like James Spader as an actor, and I think he's trying with the performance. I know it's after the film bombed. He's even admitted that this is a low point of his career, and I can see why, but he's trying. It's just he doesn't know how to work with the underdeveloped aspects, but he's giving it what he can. Same with Angela Bassett. This is another talented actress. I like Vampire in Brooklyn. Yes, it's not Wes Craven's best film, but even there, I thought she did well. but she can't do much here with what she's given. But she does well for what she has to do, especially since I like her as an actress. I do think her romance with friggin' James Spader is rushed and underdeveloped, but I think she's trying for what she has to do. There are some moments where it kind of feels like she's sleepwalking half the time, but she's fine. I'll say that. She's fine. Nothing I can say that's horrible. But they're the two best actors in the film. Peter Facinelli, again, I don't know how you say his name, but he was awful as the villain. He doesn't have a threatening presence, hamming it up. There's some moments where his delivery comes across as an underwear model trying to be threatening, or he spends some scenes naked in the movie. It just doesn't work. Diamond Phillips, who I like as an actor, not much of a performance. He's just a worker on the ship screwing Robin Tunney. Robin Tunney, I thought especially, was awful in this film. She has one expression on her face the whole film and is only on the screen to be eye candy, as every moment with her has her flirting with somebody naked or being shot out the damn spaceship. That's all her character is. Even in End of Days, I thought she did better. Robert Forster, a talented actor, is wasted in his performance. He's just there to be the captain. He ends up dying and he turns into this weird tree monster. Wilson Cruz, I will say, I liked. I thought he was likable, had some good chemistry with the cast. I liked the scene with him and the villain where he attempts to fight him. That I found really cool. I think the film would have been better if he was one of the survivors. That would have made the film surprising. Because if anything, he's the one, even with the cuts, that has the most character development to him. But the acting is really hum. And despite there being some good from 3 of the cast members, everyone else doesn't have any time to get into their characters. And most of the character development seems like it was edited out by the studio because none of them really left an impression on me. I will give the film this, though. The effects, I thought, were really good. I like the look of the alien artifact they find with this purple portal that makes the reality appear distorted. Like I said, the models on the ship look really good. The CGI by Digital Domain looks really cool. Even though I feel that moment with Angela and James having sex is rushed because of the character development, I do like the effect when it shows them in space in the window and it's them having sex in this zero gravity thing. That I found really cool. And for what effects made it into the final film, the practical effects by Patrick Tatopoulos are actually very good. I like the effect that they did with Robert Forster when he becomes the weird monster. I like the moment when Peter gets his face cut and it instantly reforms. That I thought was a cool effect. That I thought looked cool. But even those moments are ruined too because, again, it's PG-13 and those that were going to be bloody are not in the final film. Most of the deaths are tame. So if you're going into this for gore, we don't get much of it. And they're laying the deaths. So yeah, the effects are also ruined by the studio's stupidity. But I don't know what else to get across to show how much of a chore this film was to get through and how underwhelming it was. If Alien 3 didn't tell you how bad studio interference could get, this film should. I get it. It's hard to make a movie. And I feel so bad for the actors, actresses, and directors and special effects artists whose hard work had to be thrown to the wayside to appeal to a wider demographic. Because there was a lot that could have made this film so much better. And Patrick Tatopoulos showed that because there was a lot of stuff for the effects that had to be cut to get a PG-13. And there was a lot of good potential for a great film. But the final product is underwhelming, stupid, boring, and is what happens when you force a stuntman doing a motorcycle jump to duct tape pillows and helmets to his body. This is what this film has been reduced to, and it is embarrassing. MGM, fuck you for this. Fuck you for taking everyone's hard work and ruining it. So, which is why the final verdict that I give for Supernova is a 3 out of 10, and it deserves it, and it therefore gets the Alexandra seal of shit. This film is what happens when you put quantity over quality, and it's what happens when you take a film that people put hard work into and ruin it, because sometimes it's best to leave a director alone, especially when he knows what he's doing. And this film clearly shows that. And it's a piece of trash that deserves nothing. Not a cent, not any good critical reviews. It is one of the biggest waste of time I've had watching a film. So yeah, I know I went on a bit there, but just seeing what the film could have been really ticks me off. And really the fact that I took a night out to check this film out really ticks me off. So thankfully our next review next Friday will be much better. But that is the review. If anybody enjoys the film, be my guest. I want to make that clear. I mean, I'm just going off over the top, but just to be funny. But this film was just so tough for me to get through. That's my opinion, though. But yeah, next time, as I said, next Friday, I'm working on an update right now, just showing my games that I got. So be on the lookout for that. But for right now, I want to hear you guys' thoughts. Let me know in the comments below what you guys think of Supernova. Did you guys enjoy it? Let's hope there are much better horror films this year besides that film. And I'm really hoping that I review some good horror films of 2000. Because I got a few to look forward to, like Pitch Black, friggin' American Psycho. So many ones to list. Especially movies in general as well. So, yeah. But again, love to know you guys' thoughts. If you're one of the few that did see this, be sure to let me know. And be sure to rate, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye.